In an age when DEI is on the hot seat, how does an organization go about serving all people? Marie Mackintosh shares her thoughts with us on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. Today we have our guest, Marie Mackintosh, coming to us from Indianapolis, who's the president and CEO of EmployIndy, which is by any measure the largest nonprofit regional workforce development organization in the state of Indiana. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yes, excited to have you too. You do so much, or say EmployIndy does so much in the workforce space. I'm not sure we're going to get to all of it. But one of the foundational things, right, about workforce development is talent development. And I'd just like you to talk a little bit about what EmployIndy has championed in Indianapolis and Marion County when it comes to talent development.
Yeah, no problem. I think when I think about talent development, the first thing I want to say to you is I think some people might wonder, what is the difference between talent development and workforce development? And as I was reflecting on that difference, what it makes me think of is that when I was around nearing my 40th birthday, I went on a set of goals. I had some goals that I wanted to accomplish, and one of them was to do a triathlon, a sprint triathlon. And I, did a little bit of training for that, not as much as some people recommended that I do. And then I went and had a great day doing a sprint triathlon at Eagle Creek Reservoir back in the day. And like the reason I share that is because workforce development in my mind is all the systems that would make something like that triathlon that day go, right? Like it's all of the people who are organizing the event, making sure that everybody is ready for it. All the different stakeholders are prepared for ensuring that you can swim, bike, and run successfully as an individual in that race. Whereas like talent development for me is actually the training. Again, I could have done more training, but the training that one does to get ready for being able to run a successful triathlon, do that well. And so talent development is really about the individual in my mind, or a set of individuals, and workforce development more about the systems. And so with that framing, when you ask the question, like, what do we think about and like, what have we done in the space of talent development? What we tried to do is look at our system of partners and see where there were gaps. And what that led to is a lot of work that we've done in trying to bridge those gaps, especially in the K-12 space, a little bit in the post-secondary space too. And so the thing I'm the most proud of that we've done is really focused in on how we bring businesses into the classroom for students in high school and a little bit in middle school through a lot of different initiatives. We call it Talent Bound. That's our overarching work-based learning initiative that allows for businesses to plug in for a day in the high school at like a career fair, or plug in really deeply in like building an apprenticeship with us. And we've done everything in between, whether it's internships or industry challenges or job shadow events. And what it's led to is I think last year we had over 47,000 activities that occurred with different students participating in a variety of different events. And that's really grown in the time that I've been involved at EmployIndy. I'm very proud of that work and think it's really important for the moment that we're in. And then at the post-secondary level, we do some of that work too, but in different ways with our partners at 2-year and 4-year institutions. In that space, what we are often doing is providing wraparound supports to first-gen students who need additional help and hopefully completing their credential. And for the adult population, when we're doing talent development, what we're really doing is, again, partnering with our adult education partners or our local community-based organizations to make sure that they are offering the types of training programs that will help those individuals get into better jobs in the long run. So a lot of different connections there.
One of the things you mentioned, excuse me, is work-based learning, apprenticeships, internships, those sort of things, which are basically experiential opportunities. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about why experiential learning is so important. It's certainly something that's come to the forefront in the last, 5-10 years.
Yes. I feel like I could talk to you for a long time about why it's important, but I'll try to be succinct. And in my mind, if you're to ask the average human on the street how many different jobs they know about that exist out in the community, I think that most people will get to a very surface level of responses. They'll be able to talk about lawyers and doctors and nurses. They'll be able to talk about customer service, maybe sports jobs in the Indianapolis community anyway. But really underneath that surface level, there are so many jobs available and so many places where we really need our community to understand that those opportunities exist. And the truth is, especially for our young people or people who have been, in my mind, not exposed to all those opportunities for whatever reason, they can't be what they can't see. At the end of the day, people they can't become something that they have no idea exists. And so if we are in a situation where we know that we need a lot more chemists in the future because of all of the life sciences work that's happening in Indianapolis, if a young person at a local high school or middle school has never seen anyone in their community be a chemist, then it's going to be hard for them to imagine that that's a job that they could go after and achieve. So it's those sorts of things where we believe work-based learning and experiential learning makes the abstract real. When they can go and tour an industry, when they can go and see a company or hear from someone who looks just like them, who is in a position that they might aspire to be in, it makes it all feel like, that's more achievable, and it builds confidence, it builds networks, social capital, and, a lot of skills that textbooks alone just can't deliver.
Yeah. And to carry out these activities, you mentioned 47,000 activities, work-based learning, career-connected learning activities. And I think somewhere I saw on your website, I think you have like roughly 600 employers that are involved in helping carry those out. But oftentimes, employers, and this is just something that I've experienced, but I think some others have too, is that it's not the educators so much that are on board with this, but sometimes it's difficult to get employers to come to the table and actually do something. There's all kinds of excuses, right? We don't have time, we don't have the resources. And yet these are the kinds of activities that down the road are really going to help them, fill their jobs. What's been your experience in your neck of the woods in trying to get buy-in from employers?
I think you're right. Everything you've said is correct, that there's it's sort of a mixed bag with businesses and ensuring that when they're thinking about talent strategies, that they don't find themselves in a right now moment where they have big shortages for certain types of jobs, and so they're struggling to fill those, and that's more important in the moment than like engaging in a middle school on what the future of work in a particular industry might look like. Like, you can see immediately what that trade-off would be for a business that's at the end of the day still worried about ensuring that they are profitable, right? But I think for me, in a lot of ways, what I have been encouraged by in working in the talent bound and work-based learning space is that, from my perspective, employers have been a harder part of the conversation or the equation, if you will. But I really feel like we shifted the mindset, or we're in the process of shifting a mindset and a norm where I think a lot of businesses today, especially the ones we work with, don't see it as just like a charitable action or a corporate social responsibility action, but they're seeing it more as like a strategy, a long-term pipeline building strategy. And when companies see that the work that they do in building out that strategy, whether it's industry tours that they're doing, or job shadowing, or internships, or apprenticeships, whatever they're doing along that line, when they see that starts to pay off, then they're more likely to get on board, and it's a very virtuous cycle.
Yeah,
So
I think that's one of the big challenges. Just sort of dovetailing off of something you said, which is it is a long-term strategy, and I think for a lot of employers, they needed the 30 workers yesterday, and it's hard for them to buy into this idea that if they're going to go talk to middle school students, it may be 5, 6, 7, 8 years before they actually see the benefits of that.
10, 12, who knows? I know. I agree. I think it's really I call the businesses who do this work the enlightened employers in our community who are getting a competitive edge in my mind. And they've said it. And the best thing we can do is have the businesses talking to each other about those realities. We have a number. We did an event in partnership with the Indie Chamber in Ascend, Indiana, like a month ago, Rick. The two local organizations in Indianapolis, and we brought in businesses that EmployIndy works with who really shared with other business leaders what how their strategies around building a talent pipeline have shifted and what benefits they have seen from that shift. And whether it's manufacturing or sort of municipalities or I'm trying to think of some of our other, like sort of business operations firms, that are doing different work. There is this group of growing employers in Indianapolis who truly see that it's like a long-term retention strategy at the same time that they're still working on filling the 30 slots for some job. And we have things that we can do for them there too. But increasingly as a workforce leader, what I try to say to our partners is you have to have an immediate strategy and a long-term strategy, just like you would for any other type of supply that you're working to build within your organization. So
Yeah, no.
it's an ongoing conversation for sure. But I'm hopeful we're starting to see a shift in how people think about it.
Another component to workforce development are wages, and you have a good wage initiative that I hope I'm getting this right, that certifies employers who offer full-time wages of at least $18 an hour plus health insurance. I know for a good long while there have been employees who have tried to circumvent the idea of good wages, and then they're surprised when they can't find skilled workers or quality workers or workers at all. How is that initiative going for you in Indianapolis?
I mean, similarly to the conversation about businesses writ large just a moment ago, it's been a lift. We launched the Good Wages Initiative a few years ago, and really on a shoestring budget from my perspective. We didn't have a ton of investment to make it happen, but really believed in a lot of the job quality frameworks that we've seen around the country, whether it's the Aspen Institute or MIT, the Good Jobs Institute. There's a lot of great research out there about why this is good for companies and really why it's good for the community. A lot of the people who've been involved in this initiative, Rick, are tied to the hunger, food insecurity community. And, a lot of the crazy stats that exist in Indianapolis around how many people are already working. I think it's something like 40% of struggling workers are, like 40% of all families in Indianapolis are sort of one emergency away from insecurity, like from not being able to eat, from not being able to have all the things that they need to just sort of make ends meet. And when those are people who are already working, I think it's our job to raise that to the business community and help them to understand that if people are hungry, if they're not able to bring their full selves to the workplace, then the productivity is going to suffer in a business. And it's something that they really have to grapple with. And so the companies we have over 100 companies who have documented that they've raised wages to the tune of about $5.5 million at this point. And it's the average increase per worker is something like $4,000 or $5,000. And what they say is that it was hard to make that shift, but that they're glad that they did because they believe it gives them a competitive advantage and that they have a better workforce as a result. So I don't think it's something that we are not in the business of saying that something like this should be mandated, especially in Indiana. None of that we are focused on. It's really meant to be market driven, this initiative where community members, nonprofits, and business leaders come together and say, this makes sense for our community so that we don't become, sort of trapped in a cycle that's dangerous for a community of like really low wage jobs and trying to find workers who will fill those jobs, but it doesn't really allow a community to thrive. So that's a lot of the reason why we do it. And so I think it's been pretty successful. I think there's more to do to make this a movement and to make more businesses who may not feel like they can make the jump to good wages right away have other ways that they can improve job quality in our community, even though wages remain foundational. And just for the record, for any listeners out there, today, when you look at the numbers, we're more at like $22 to $25 an hour that at least in Indianapolis, our workers should be making to not be in that struggling worker status.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. Gosh, we got so much to talk about here that we'll never get to. You're going to have to come back, Marie.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, no, seriously. All talent development is often thought of as a youth center, activity, but really a lot of it also has to do with people who are adults, who are in the workforce. Perhaps they have some education, perhaps they don't, but there's some talent development need there. And yet, and I think my guess is you probably found this, sometimes it's very hard to encourage an adult to really take the opportunities that are available to them, some of which are free, that allow them to upgrade their skills. How have you managed, or what has been your strategy in trying to get? And they're not all skeptical. Some of them have barriers to it that they can't seem to overcome. But how have you managed to deal with an adult population that is not necessarily overall clamoring to jump on the skills upgrade train?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a many hands approach, and I think that this is an area where EmployIndy hopes to be able to do more in the coming years. We haven't. There's so much more to do, Rick, and frankly, just not enough resources out there to really make it all happen the way that we would like. To your point, I think that where we focus with the adult population is often on the training, and like you said, sometimes free training that's available for people to be able to upgrade their skills. The trouble is that most of the time, the adult populations that our teams are encountering, who like just any adult out there, though, really, the challenge that they have is that they have a lot of life happening around them that is hard for them to work in additional training programming. So what we have found to be the most successful is really a lot of work that our partners do that we try to lift up in the community. I think what adult education does for helping businesses help, for instance, English language learners to upskill their English language learning on site, and they may get time paid for to do that, to help them have more productivity in the workplace is a really good model. I think that where we are able to fund some of those employer training grants that allow for skills upgrade to happen on the job, where again, people are receiving that benefit while they're at work and it's part of their work environment, really matters. And that's a very fragmented system, but I think that is an important piece of the puzzle that isn't often talked about. That there is a lot of training that businesses can be doing, and that we as a workforce board, if we can, should be wrapping our arms around that and helping businesses to really continue that trajectory of like internal pathways for people because of the skills upgrades that they've received. But then there's also the worker who's out in the community who maybe doesn't have the best job and is just looking for like their next opportunity on that any job, better job, career, like kind of continuum. And for those workers, what we have seen to be the most successful is, again, where there is skills training that's happening for them on a consolidated time frame with wraparound supports and maybe a work experience tied to it at the end, back to experiential learning, where they have supports from whoever is helping them barrier bust to make sure that they can be successful on that job when they make that shift. And that's really for our populations, like for individuals who have had more knocks in their career, who haven't necessarily been able to really jump to the level that they want to be. That's another group that we work with our community center partners. There's lots of cool work happening in Indianapolis with partners like the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, Indianapolis, and the United Way in that space. The last thing I'll say is that then there's the career changer population, people who really do just go out and seek the next set of training that they want to do. And they're not really tied to any community centers or tied to a business to do it. And my favorite program, Rick, that we ever had in this space was for people who are like 50 something and up, where it's harder to make those transitions. And sometimes their biggest issue is like a confidence issue, or they need to believe in what their next step is going to be, and they need people to tell them that they can reach it. And then they also need some basic like employability skills support on like upgrading, I don't know, like their Excel experience, or their, now it'll be artificial intelligence experience, or digital skills. And there's not enough of funding for those soft programming out there. We used to have more of it than we did for businesses. So, or for people who are trying to make that change into better jobs with businesses. So there's a lot there, Rick, that we do, but there's always more that could be being done. But I think that's why I think it's a many hands approach,
I agree with you on the confidence issue. I think that's a large issue and not just people 55 and older, or whatever age range you want to throw into it.
Totally.
I think the whole idea of confidence, can I do this? And the world is changing so fast. You mentioned AI. Maybe we get into AI here on the podcast, or a couple other questions I wanted to ask, but AI is an important one. There are.
Well, if I could say one more thing about this confidence piece, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure that people who are listening think about when the last time is that they searched for a job, and how long did it take them to figure out what that next job was going to be, and how hard was that updating of a resume, thinking about how you sell your skills, like all of those things. It's not easy, and it's increasingly more difficult in our world today because of how applicant tracking systems work, how it's a lot harder to feel like you're going to be able to get in somewhere unless you know the right people. Like the world is not a meritocracy. A lot of it is who you know. And so I think the more we can be doing to try to build connections for our community neighbors to get into some of those roles with bigger companies, the better. But the confidence game is real. And I think for anybody who's gone through a job search, it's never easy. And if it's forced upon you, it's even harder.
Couple other things, and these are, I don't know, these are more 30,000 foot level, I think, and possibly sensitive. But one of them is that, so here we are in this era of pretty much clamping down on the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. And yet, so many organizations have been focusing on that for years. So how does a organization, not necessarily a government organization, because the government organizations have a few more restrictions on them than nonprofits, at least now they do. For instance, your universities pretty much can't talk about it. But how do you deal with serving the whole population in this particular environment?
It's interesting because, we are quasi-governmental. We receive a lot of federal and state funding, and we are also a nonprofit. Like we serve in a couple of different capacities at EmployIndy, and so this has certainly been a hot topic in the last few months for us as well. And what I have told our team, and what I believe to be true, is that the work we do, especially if you read the law that governs our work, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, written into that is that word opportunity. And it's very clear in the law that what we're to do is work with a lot of different special populations, is actually the word that's used, to make sure that we are creating opportunity, to your point, for everyone in the community. But we have to double down in areas and places and spaces where it's more difficult for people to get to that opportunity. So whether it's a socioeconomic issue, like the neighborhoods we target in Indianapolis, like the neighborhoods where we want to double down on our work, are neighborhoods where there is much higher unemployment and much higher poverty rates, and probably not always a surprise to many. Like that's also there's also a lot of people of color who live in those neighborhoods, and so we feel it's incumbent upon us as an organization to continue to serve those neighborhoods in partnership with our community-based partners. But we're also looking to serve people with disabilities. We're looking to serve people who have, are looking for a second chance because they're returning citizens. We're working with our partners to figure out how we serve those who are unhoused currently, And I think that what's important to remember is that, creating more opportunity and more equity in the community has always been central to workforce success. And I think, if you're looking at it in terms of access and competitiveness as a community, right, which is really what WIOA was all about, if we're not tapping into all of our community's talent, every single individual in our community, then ultimately businesses are losing out on potential workers and we're not thriving as much as we can. So I hope that's a message that critics and skeptics hear, and one that we continue to just try to live out in creating opportunity for everybody in Indianapolis.
Yeah, and one of the things, one of the things too about that is the messages and how you reach people. Often varies. It's not always. It's right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, so there has to be some intentional focus on various groups, because the messaging or the way you reach people is going to be tailored to their situations, their interests, perhaps cultures. And this is me saying this. I just, I don't think that a one size fits all just works.
Yeah, I agree. I think, frankly, in the work that I do, the way that I talk when I'm messaging or sending out information to businesses and engaging in the business community is different than the way in which I'm engaging at a very local grassroots community-based organization. So, yeah, I mean, we have to be able to meet people where they are, and that's across the board. We're at EmployIndy. We're very interested again in making sure we create opportunity for every individual, and believe that will create in the long run a more fair community, a more equitable community writ large.
We're getting close to the end. I know it went fast. One of the things that distinguishes EmployIndy from other organizations of its kind, especially in Indiana, I think there are some in other areas of the country, that is this whole mix of funding. And you say that you get some government money, but the truth of the matter is that EmployIndy has gone out and gotten an incredible amount of money from other funding sources, which is what has allowed EmployIndy to not only grow its staff, but also grow its impact. I mean, to the extent, Marie, that you are the gold standard when it comes to how you put money together to accomplish what you do. Is that a model that everyone should follow? Because my experience in this space is that, and that's probably why EmployIndy did this, is you really can't depend on the government money. It goes up, it goes down, it depends on what the economy is, depends on what somebody's political persuasion is. But you have a lot more flexibility in what you're able to do because you have diversified your funding sources.
Yes, I think that's true. And I appreciate the kind words you shared. For me, what I think matters the most at leading a nonprofit organization is that you have clear strategies that resonate with the community and with a variety of different stakeholders who are interested in funding what you're doing, and at the end of the day, you got to lead with the strategy. You got to lead with what we believe is really going to create that maximum impact in the community, and try really hard not to chase dollars. And it's not as easy when you find yourselves in more scarce environments, which we are in today. I mean, it's a more scarce funding environment across the board, whether we're talking about government funding or other types of foundational funding that are out there. It's all a lot tighter right now because of a lot of the uncertainties that exist. And so nonetheless, in the current environment, what I work to tell our team, and if I'm talking to any potential funder, whether it's the state of Indiana or a foundation that we work with, is the same. And that is that, EmployIndy's vision is that we're looking to ensure residents have access to skills and training opportunities that will help them get into good jobs, and that businesses can find the talent that they're looking for to create a more thriving economic mobile society or in Indianapolis. And in order to do that, we have some different tactics that we're engaging in. To me, you got to do it that way. If you're focused just on receiving government funds, or focus just on trying to chase a small grant, but you don't know how it fits into the bigger puzzle, then that is not sustainable either. It's really making sure you have clarity on, what the strategies are and how your organization fits into the broader ecosystem that you find yourself in, which again, in Indianapolis, there are tons of cool organizations that are doing lots of good work in the space of economic mobility. And what we try to do is not duplicate that and lean into where we have more competency in the work we do.
Well, listen, that's our time up. You've been terrific. I've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you do come back, because I have a whole host of other questions that we didn't get to. But thank you for today, Marie. Hope to see you again.
It was a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.